Well, what drew me to studying migrations, I think, it was several things. One is, as an ecologist, beginning to understand the importance of migrations to ecosystems. When animals can move freely, their populations can grow more abundant, and they can feed lots of other critters and things that we care about on landscapes. I think the other thing is just what draws almost everybody to migrations, which is they're kind of amazing and inspiring, and there's something about them that I think resonates with people around, the journey of life and the challenges and everything that's involved. The Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is one of the last really wild and really pretty intact ecosystems, and it's one of the last migratory systems where these animal movements, even though we've lost some of them, and even though some of them are struggling with, new developments and fences and other things, more than almost anywhere in the world, is we have that intact. A lot of our work has focused on elk. The reason for that is that of the 6 species of hoofed mammals that migrate across the West, elk, particularly in the Greater Yellowstone, are kind of a linchpin. They're the prey of many species. They really influence plants and other parts of the ecosystem strongly, and so they made sense as a focal species. But really, they just help us tell a broader story about these wide-ranging animal movements, these ungulate migrations. So they were kind of the key character that I think helped us bring out the science and the story of the migrations. One way to think about the migrations in the system is they are as important a national treasure as Old Faithful. And yet you can't drive up and park your car and walk 2 minutes over to see them, and you can't get a schedule of when they're going to happen so that you can predict it and plan your day around it. That's where Joe's work was absolutely critical, is he was sort of the person who, on behalf of the public and everybody who wanted to learn about these, could go set up his camera traps, get in there, spend the time, and bring back the pictures and the video that could really help people understand what it was that we were talking about here. And without that, the science would probably fall on a lot of deaf ears. With the researchers that started with the Camp Monaco Prize and others that came as a result of that funding, there's a series of really important scientific insights that we were able to gain. I think one, it was just being able to fill out the map. It was having the ability to start going to each of the agencies, the other scientists working in the system, each of whom had a piece of this story about these migrations, ask them to borrow their information and put it in one place. And then when we saw gaps, go out and fill them, go out and capture animals and put collars on them. And so that led to a nearly complete map of, in this case, the elk migrations of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And I think that was eye-opening because it started to really help people see that these migrations can be a driver of an entire ecosystem, that they can be part of what defines, including in new ways that we hadn't thought about before, an entire 20 or 22 million acre ecosystem where we see, depending on how you define it, 16 or 20 of these migrations moving in and out each year from the core areas of the system. Another key insight when you start building that map is the degree to which these animals use all lands. But in the context of conservation, what's important is realizing that about 30% of it is private land. It's often well taken care of, but it doesn't have a lot of long-term guarantee that it's going to be well stewarded or protected in the long haul the way that the parks and the national forests and other public lands do. And so I think really just helping people see the degree to which Yellowstone's wildlife, Grand Teton National Park's wildlife, depend on unprotected land, where we need to have a conversation about what that's going to look like in the future. One of the other things is fences, other barriers. So it's going to take the removal of fences that aren't needed anymore. There's a lot of fencing on the landscape that people didn't know was in a place that was problematic for wildlife until recently. There was no good reason to get rid of it until people really started to see that. And so there are other places where there's going to be a continued need to have a fence, but it could maybe be a little easier to cross or to pass through. I want people to learn that, places like Yellowstone or a national forest or, a ranch next to them, these aren't zoos. Animals move. They need big open spaces. And when we give them that space, that is how we get abundance and productivity of life, that we depend on for so many things, whether that's, inspiration or recreation or economic and cultural, values so many people have around the wildlife. But I also want people to learn something about what it takes to keep those wildlife going. And when you look at the elk migrations or mule deer or pronghorn or grizzly bears, there's so many other things in this system, and you really pay attention, what you'll see is that they cross all the lands. And what that means is that they depend on actions taken by everybody on each unit of land in a system like this. And so ultimately, I really want people to learn that their relationships with each other is the absolutely critical, fundamental driver of keeping nature intact.